YouTube so we don't have feedback. But it's probably already live. Just doesn't tell me. It's always a few seconds of me just staring at the screen.
Hello. Hi. Oh, I'm going to change my name. You are very cute this time, Lynn.
Very good.
How is everybody?
Waiting
Good.
for the live to go live.
Yes, we are live. Oh, Connie, hi.
Hey.
I feel like I know you, but I don't.
Hello, Connie.
Oh, nice. We've got a few people
A
joining.
lot of people. That's good.
Great. Oops, did I just do something?
And hello, Chelsea.
Hello, Chelsea.
Okay. So today we are, whoa, sorry, my screen's all over the place. Don't mind me. Why is this doing this? Of course. I've got it. Okay. There we go. Okay, so hello. So welcome to WE-Solation. For anyone new, we started WE-Solation back, feels like almost a lifetime ago. I think April 1st was maybe our first, or maybe the end of March. But anyway, it was just a way for us to still kind of keep growing our community and keep the community strong and continue learning from each other while we're in isolation. So we have Erika and Lynn, and Adriana's probably gonna join us later, and I'm not sure if Tony's gonna join us as well, but
She's busy, sadly. She had to meet with her banker.
Oh,
real life things, you know?
Yeah. So that's, and Tony and Lynn make up Plastic Free TO, and Adriana, who will be joining us hopefully later, is Collective Impact Journey. And I'm Sophie, your eco friend. And we have Emily from the Toronto Environmental Alliance with us. I'm very excited to get chatting with that. And before we start with an intro for Emily, we always like to start with a land acknowledgement. So we're all in, when I say we, I mean the WE-Solation team and Emily, and we're all in Toronto. So our land acknowledgement will be Toronto based. So we acknowledge that we are located on the traditional Indigenous territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Mississaugas of the New Credit, and many diverse First Nations, including Inuit and Métis people. And I wanted to, we always like to kind of expand on that rather than just saying it and then moving on. I wanted to share something that I found that kind of ties in with what we're talking about today is recycling. And there's this really great organization in Winnipeg, actually, called Mother Earth Recycling, which is like, how lovely is that? And it's an Indigenous owned social enterprise. And they focus on e-waste and refurbishing anything that they can. So with that, they create job skills. So they hire Indigenous youth, as well as folks who have barriers to employment. And they also recycle mattresses as well. So I'd encourage anyone to kind of take a look. If you are tuning in today, you're probably obviously interested in recycling. So here's a little excerpt from their website, which I thought was just kind of beautiful. So the act of recycling has cultural significance for Aboriginal communities. Embedded within traditional Aboriginal worldviews is the concept of collective responsibility to respect and maintain the natural environment and use only what is needed for sustenance. While we work with modern technologies, our commitment to environmental sustainability will allow our Aboriginal employees to reconnect with an integral part of our culture, of their culture. Anyway, so I thought that was probably the most lovely recycling facility website page that I'd ever gone on.
Very holistic.
Yeah, right. Anyway, so I just wanted to put that out there, and we'll put that in the description for the YouTube link later for anyone who's tuning in later. So without further ado, maybe Emily, you could introduce yourself for us, please. Oh, mute. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So I'm Emily. I'm the waste campaigner for the Toronto Environmental Alliance, or T, as we like to call ourselves. So T has been around for 30 years. We've been working on local environmental issues in Toronto. We work with workers, with community groups, with politicians, with businesses, and we work to build a greener city for all. So we're very focused on equity issues. We're doing a lot of work right now on climate change and on waste. So that includes working with community groups to do education and sort of proof of concept ideas of what's possible and help, show a vision for what we can really achieve. And then also advocating for good policies and programs at the city level and at the provincial level. And we work with a lot of other environmental groups as well.
Nice.
So.
Thank you, Emily.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, maybe we'll just jump right into the questions that we have, because it kind of will help us guide our conversation today. We kind of liked it to just kind of flow, but we thought questions are always kind of a fun thing to do. I know I enjoy them, and it kind of changes the Zoom thing, because I know we've all been doing lots of Zooms. So
can I make a question first?
Oh yes, yeah, please.
Can I make a question first? I would like to know, because I didn't ask you yet, Emily, but what brought you to be a campaigner today? Like,
oh, that's a good question. So it's like what brought me to tea and what brought me to this work. I've always cared about the environment. I was raised in the age of learning about extinction, the rainforests, and the ozone layer. And I was like, as a kid, I grew up really concerned about the environment. And then in university, I also studied urban planning, which is about like how cities are formed and how cities are shaped. And it's just a really interesting sort of background to think about, like how our streets are shaped affects how people get around, and how our buildings are designed affects how people feel and interact with each other, and the way we create public space can be inclusive or can be exclusive. And so just sort of thinking about these systems and how they can contribute to a healthy environment and equitable society, or break those things down and create sort of really separate kind of societies. So those were sort of my interests. And I was working in an environmental organization, and I was teaching people about water and water systems and rainwater and stormwater, and that's like how cities are designed and how that affects those things. But what I love about tea is that tea is really about the policy, because I think there's a lot of like talk about, if people should know this thing, or people should take these steps to recycle better, or people could do these things to reduce waste in their lives, or people should drive less. But the fact is that we've got these whole systems and cities and consumer systems designed around us that really funnel us into these unsustainable ways of living. So I got really interested in like, how can we change the system instead of just being, buried in personal guilt and this feeling that it's all my fault and I've got to solve this, and I've got to convince every other person I know to solve this, and every other person in the city and the country and the world to all take these little actions, or we can change the system. So it's like my own personal interest, and then interest in systems, and then sort of coming to tea, where like tea's got this great reputation of having done a lot of policy stuff. So I was pretty excited when I got the chance to start working at tea, and then I got the waste bug, as my team has called it. Like once you start getting into waste and thinking about it, it's really hard to like stop talking about it. So I'll talk about waste anytime with anyone. Yeah, that's a little bit of my story.
I love the term. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for asking that, Erika. I love hearing the story of why. So thanks for sharing, Emily.
No worries.
Any other questions from anyone? And but if anyone has any questions at any time, feel free to, if you're watching on YouTube, you can ask questions there, or ask questions in Zoom as well. So feel free to do that. Lynn, will you be putting up the questions?
The host is the one that has like the launch.
Okay.
So
Oh, there it is. Okay, I've not done it before. Bear with me.
it's super easy. Don't worry.
I do see the polls. Yeah, there's a button for polls. So can't be too. Now, can you see that? Does that mean people? Oh no, launch polling. Never mind.
Now I can see it. Amazing.
Woo. Okay, so how do we just show one? Can we show one thing at a time?
No.
Oh,
No,
okay.
you have to make them separate polls to do that.
Screen. Try to hide the rest of the questions.
You could tell us just to answer the first one.
Yeah, just answer the first one because I can't really hide.
That's true. I got it.
Yeah. I think anyway. Spelling, grammar. Okay. Has your ways changed since COVID? Have you had an increase in your waste, like packaged food, takeout containers, disposable PPE? If it's the same as before, or if it's less than before, since you're maybe not going out as much and you're cooking at home more, or unsure.
Now, Sophie, I submitted a response. Did it work?
I don't know.
People.
I think we have to answer all questions in order to submit.
Oh no, darn. How was I supposed to do that?
Zoom
Okay,
polls
well,
aren't super easy.
we're all learning.
Let's go for it.
I'm the one who's learning. Okay.
But we can also do it like,
you could just close the poll and then reopen it again later.
One by one.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just do that. And then at the end, we'll just answer them all so that, I see that's, okay. So some people have gone through it all. Okay. I'm not sure what I should do. Maybe I'll just close it so we can kind of continue on. I'm so sorry, people.
Wait, we could all just answer the questions and then we'll just go through them one by one.
Yes, good idea, Lynn. Sorry, I was not good under pressure.
Well, I'm sorry, I was very concentrated on the questions. They are very good.
It's hard, and it's hard when you see questions. You're like, no, I want to say yes, no. This is this is cool to see, though. Okay, so
it's cool because
we'll just let it go for a couple minutes.
Yeah. So I just answered all the questions, and just so, and if any of you are shy to answer, your answers are anonymous. So
thank you.
We cannot see which ones you're getting wrong. Because as I answered, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm getting some of these wrong.
And we are not judging anyone.
No. And the reason these questions are here is because they are common questions. And some of them are questions that I personally was like, I'm not even sure about this. So I thought it was a good opportunity to talk about it. But while we have that up, I'll leave it up for a few minutes. Maybe I can ask Emily, has your waste changed since COVID?
It totally has.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, for sure.
Yeah.
Some of it's changed. Like, I think some of it's changed just because of like, I'm at home more. So stuff that I would take to work and eat at the office, and like maybe take out food that I'd get at the office or something. I'm not doing that as much. I'm not bringing reusable coffee cups to the coffee shop right now because my local one doesn't really take that. Getting more bags when I get food delivered, and just more deliveries generally. So it's definitely increased. And I live in a house with 2 other apartments, and I've noticed our garbage bin is close to full and our recycling bin is overflowing every time we set it out. So there's definitely more in our whole household.
Yeah, I'm the same too. I noticed, like, let's say maybe it was 2 years ago, I had like actually looked at the waste that I had created, and I think it was like 1 grocery bag for like 4 months plus or something. And now, albeit it's still less than I think I would have maybe previously, but I think it was like a bag for a month now. And now since then, which was only a few weeks ago, I've already almost filled, like in 2 or 3 weeks, I've almost filled a bag. So yeah, it's different. I'm not stressing about it. How about you,
I think
Erika?
for me, it was like, I have to be honest, when the pandemic started, I increased a lot, because instead of going to the farmer's market, I was going to the supermarket, and I had less options, and I was buying everything in bulk before, and now it's very difficult.
Yeah.
And but I'm still like very stubborn, so I started to decrease my waste, and I'm still using reusables when I take out. And I'm just like, I feel that depends on the restaurant owner, and depends on the anxiety that they have, they will accept it or not. But I would say that it has increased the packaging for sure, because of the bulk part. But I'm still very, very stubborn.
How about you, Lynn? How about you and Tony? Has it changed?
Definitely increased.
Yeah.
And mostly, honestly, just from like takeaway, because ordering food, I just, you know me, and cooking, it doesn't go well. And so like eating out is still like, oh man, I can't bring my own containers. Or like, you know, just order the food for here and then put it in my own container, which is what I got really used to doing. So yeah, I think most of our waste has honestly just been from me eating out, to be honest. And then sometimes, yeah, buying stuff in the like, because of the long lines at certain stores, I will avoid them and go to other less sustainable stores. But I mean, with things like Bear Market still being open, and us like getting groceries from what's that thing called? A farm co-op exchange.
CSA?
CSA, thank you. A lot of that has been good because we've been able to avoid packaging that way. And Urban Bulk and Refill in our area is still open as well. So yeah. So it's increased, but it's still not like the worst thing ever, but
Yeah. So we'll go on to the next question. I'll share the results. So the next question was, how much of what gets put into your blue box? Now, this is all pertaining to Toronto, all the questions, and some of them are general. I guess this one is general. How much of your of what goes into your blue box at home gets recycled? So 9%, 35%, 75%, or all of it. And let me see. Nyla, I'm just busy right now. Okay, so yeah, I'm a little bit busy. Can we talk about this after?
I was actually very curious about this one specifically.
Yes. So it looks like most people answered 9%. And so maybe, Emily, you can help us out with that.
Yeah. Well, that question was planted for a reason. It wasn't just an amazing coincidence. This is actually something that I wanted to talk about, because this 9% statistic is something that a lot of us hear. And I know it's really discouraging that only 9% of plastics in Canada get recycled. But the fact is, when you're looking at your blue box at home, the number is actually, that doesn't apply to your blue box at home. So 77% was the correct answer there. So when we're talking about our blue box at home, we know that almost all of it gets recycled. And the only reason why a little bit less than 100% gets recycled is because people put the wrong thing in the blue box. So about 25% of what people put in the blue box doesn't belong there. People put the wrong types of foil wrappers in. They put aluminum foil in. They they leave food in a jar and that spills all over paper, so that gets contaminated. So then they have to take it out and throw it away. But everything that's recyclable that you put in your blue bin that isn't contaminated gets recycled. So that's a good news. And so I want everyone to hear that. And I can explain a little bit more about the system if this is a
I
good
have
time to
some
do it.
questions about it.
Go.
Because 30% of the waste, I'm sorry, it's 30% of residential waste is managed by the city of Toronto. I forgot the percentage.
Yeah, so let me explain a little bit how the waste system works.
Okay.
So because I can explain it because it's so complicated. I didn't get a lot of diagrams because some of this is hard to explain, but I'll sort of explain some of it to you. So I've got some notes just to make sure that I'm going to try to do this in order. So in Canada and in Ontario, municipal governments are responsible for collecting waste from households, but waste from non-residential buildings isn't collected by the city. So when we talk about Toronto's recycling rules, it only applies to what happens at home. It doesn't apply to what happens at the office, at a shopping mall, in a warehouse, or in a hospital. All those places called industrial, commercial, or institutional, they are all required to pay for a private waste company to pick up their waste. In Ontario, 2/3 of all waste is actually non-residential waste. So most of the waste in the province is not even residential waste. Hi, Adriana.
Okay.
We're just talking about the statistic about 9% of our plastics getting recycled, and I am saying how that's actually a scarier number than it should be. Well, it's an important number, but it doesn't really apply to our home blue box.
And I think everything comes to the point that we are not really measuring properly, or it's not like a hard science, like waste.
Yeah. Yeah, there's different measurements. So one of the really important facts is that municipalities collect from households, and municipalities in Ontario are required to collect blue box materials from the curb from a household, and the province has regulations that require that non-residential buildings, so all institutions, offices, industrial places, that they have to collect recycling, but no one really enforces those rules, and no one really tracks where that waste goes. So it's this huge gap in our system. And generally when we've seen those shipping containers full of plastics ending up overseas, and they were labeled as recyclable, but it was just garbage, those are usually coming from private waste sources. Those aren't coming from municipal governments. Municipal governments have much stricter regulations that they have to follow. And because of the sort of lack of reporting and transparency and enforcement, the private sector waste and recycling rules are really not followed as closely. Like in terms of a building may not have to collect the same materials. There's no real tracking to prove. There's no government oversight to prove that when you put a bottle in the recycling office bin that is actually getting recycled. No one's following that downstream. But municipalities, so this is where we talk about the blue box a little bit. You may not have thought of it this way, but the blue box was designed to recycle packaging, right? The blue box was designed when companies shifted from having refillable containers. So you used to get your pop in a glass bottle, your milk came in a glass bottle. Newspapers just came without a plastic bag around them when people still read newspapers in the olden days. And so all of these things just went like companies sold their products in reusable containers or no packaging at all. And when they started shifting to disposable packaging, because they're like, oh, this is great. This is so much easier for us. We don't have to send a truck back to pick this stuff up. Municipalities started saying, whoa, now you're adding to our garbage load. We have more stuff to pick up every single day. This is too much work. So they sort of came to an agreement that we'll provide a little bin and we'll pick up all that packaging from municipalities, from your households, and we'll cover the cost of that recycling because that's still cheaper than us coming back to get reusable bottles. So that's how the blue box started in Ontario, but then companies didn't keep paying for it. So then municipalities started paying the cost of recycling. So municipalities have to have recycling collected all the time, and right now, companies pay about 50% of the cost. So the province says, you guys have to contribute some of the cost of the blue box. So that's like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Unilever, Johnson & Johnson, all those companies, they contribute to this fund through Stewardship Ontario. And every municipality, every year, they track, here's how many number 1 plastics, number 2 plastics, number 3 plastics we picked up. And they send this report to this authority called the Resource Productivity and Recovery Authority, or RIPRA. I know it's really accessible terms. So they submit their report there, and then Ripper says, cool, okay, so Coke, you're responsible for 50% of the #1 bottles in the market. You have to give this much money. And so then they distribute that money to each of the municipalities. So Lynn, I see that you're excited by this.
Wait, this is the thing that actually happens now?
This is what happens right now. And this is why I love telling people this story, because it's like, whoa, the waste system's so complicated, but we've already established that it's companies' responsibility to pay for packaging. That's already an established fact that every major company knows, but they try to make it seem like it's your fault when you can't recycle it. So
right.
it gets better.
So this is in Ontario, or like, how does BC's system sort of differ from this, I guess?
Perfect question.
Way.
So this concept is called extended producer responsibility. And this concept has existed in Europe for a while. It's been in Ontario for a long time. So we have full producer responsibility for things like e-waste and batteries and paint. So the companies that sell you batteries, it's their job to cover the cost of recycling of batteries. So when you drop your batteries off to a special battery recycler, they get their money from the battery company. Same with e-waste. So when you buy a computer, Samsung, Apple, they're covering the cost of that recycling. That's why we don't have to pay for it. So we can just drop it off and someone does that. So for Ontario, we've had full producer responsibility for certain types of waste, but only shared producer responsibility when it comes to the blue box and packaging waste. And the industry term is PPP, or printed paper and packaging. I know, again, all these terms are so, just call it packaging. So Ontario has like a 50% shared producer responsibility model. And in BC, they've moved to full producer responsibility. So in BC, there's an organization called Recycle BC, and it represents all the companies that sell products in BC. And all those companies have to report to the government or to the agency every year. Here's how much we sold to the consumers. Here's the kind of packaging we used. Here's the weight of the packaging. Here's how many units. They do all this detailed reporting. And then they have to make sure that every household in BC has either access to a depot or a curbside blue bin. It gets picked up by the waste companies that they contract to do it. They collect it, they sort it, and they track it, and they say, cool, I've proven that I've collected 70% of the bottles I put on the market, or I've collected 50% of the containers I put on the market. So that's how it works in BC. There's some problems with how it works in BC, but the good news is it's actually coming to Ontario as well. So actually in like the next 5 weeks, probably 5 weeks, 6 weeks, maybe 6.5. I don't know. Sorry, the next few months, we're going to have a new regulation posted in Ontario, and T will be doing our best to like tell you guys about this and give you some tips on how you can comment. But in Ontario, there's been a commitment to move towards full producer responsibility as well since 2016. They've actually been working toward this since the day I started at T in 2010. They've been talking about moving to full producer responsibility, but there's been endless battles between everyone, and now we're finally almost there. So what this will mean is that in Ontario, instead of municipalities paying for half the blue box and operating the blue box, and then producers contribute a small amount, they'll take over the whole system. And the idea is that this gives companies an incentive to use less packaging or to make more recyclable packaging because it cuts their costs directly.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so it's a really long story, but the risk, of course, is that you have to have good reporting, right? If you're letting companies run the blue box and you're letting them collect the blue box and then you're letting them say to the government, we did our job, you have to have really good accountability. You have to have audits going in and checking. You have to make sure that what they define recycling as is really clear. So, you know, as an environmental group, we've been pushing to say, we don't want to have it like in Europe in some places, you can burn garbage and call that recycling. So that's like in Sweden, when people talk about Sweden having a high recycling rate, it's because they burn most of their garbage. It's not actually recycling. And so we want to make sure that the way Ontario counts recycling in the future is that you actually recycle it. So that problem I mentioned earlier about private waste streams that aren't overseen by a municipal or provincial government, they can just say they're going to recycle something and then send it to a second party recycler or a third party recycler, and no one ever knows if it actually gets recycled, or if by the time it gets to another country, it's so contaminated they just burn it. So what's going to happen in Ontario, if we do this right, is that there will actually be a requirement for a company to prove that what they got collected actually got recycled into a new product. So this is like really exciting news. This is kind of game changing, right? This will mean that across Ontario, we have the same recycling rules everywhere. And if companies are actually held to recycle all the packaging they put on the market, this means that instead of cities scrambling to recycle those complicated new packages, they come up with a new fancy package every single year, that it'll be the company's job to fix that and to make sure it actually gets recycled.
I have a quick question, Emily.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this is talking a lot about the companies that are putting out plastic water bottles like Coca-Cola and things like that. But what about like takeaway food waste? So is there a way to track that? And does this responsibility go back to chains like McDonald's and those types of establishments at all? Or is this strictly talking about kind of those plastic water bottles and such?
It's a good question. It actually, one of the improvements that we're seeing to the current system is that that kind of takeout packaging in those containers will be included. So convenience packaging will be included in this sort of thing. So that means McDonald's, Tim Hortons, all the things they sell to the market, they'll have to make sure it gets recycled.
Hallelujah.
I know, it's good. It's a really promising model, but we got to make sure it works right, because
yeah, and I think everything comes back to self-interest and having a little bit of accountability, because self-interest is just, it goes wild when you let everyone just pursue your own interest. We are humans, so
yeah,
it's good. I'm very happy.
Yeah, it's something I think like we can be really happy about it. Like, as you know, environmentalists have been pushing for this for a long time in Ontario, and you know, in the US, EPR or producer responsibility regulations like this are just so far behind. They keep getting stopped because the packaging industry is also the plastics industry, which is also the oil industry, which is also the natural gas and fracking industry. So they've got a lot of money behind them that would really doesn't want recycling, because when you recycle, you don't need new fossil fuels, you don't need new gas, you don't need new oil. So there's a lot of money behind you know, pushing to offload the cost to individuals. There's a lot of interest in making us feel like it's our fault and that we're not doing enough when we create too much garbage, and making us feel guilty for ordering takeout in containers that aren't recyclable, when it's like, why are they allowed to sell something that's not recyclable? If, you know, let's just pass a law and say that you can't make it if it's not recyclable, or let's pass a law and say you got to make it reusable. Like, we can push for those things, and I think that's the power that we have when we know about these options, and when we see that the system actually could work that way. And like, these companies just want us to feel like it's our fault. So yeah.
No more. No
Yeah,
more.
and glad to hear that we're moving forward in a different direction and trying something new. And hopefully, like you said, we can have that accountability and that transparency, and that we have audits going in, and that we've got the data. But I'm glad to hear that we're at least moving in that direction.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, I'm gonna. Oh, sorry.
I'm just gonna say I'm so happy for more people to know it, and I will be telling you guys about it. And just for sure, we're gonna make sure that we all speak up a lot, so that the province hears what we really want, so that the lobbyists from the companies don't get them to water these regulations down, or water the audit requirements down, or anything. So
T is my first go-to spot. If I'm looking for information on what is happening right here, right now, that's my go-to. So thanks for putting that out there always.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next. Oh, wait, I can't. Hang on. The next question. Wait, is someone else in the team in it? Because it says.
Oh, maybe Adriana, did you join as the host?
That's okay. It's fine. I was just gonna share that I have the question.
Okay,
I was just gonna share what the results were, but the next question was, in Toronto, do recyclables get cleaned during processing?
What was the answer? What did everyone say?
Well, the answer is no. They do not, which is why we're so why it always says in all of the materials for recycling is that we have to clean everything, right? And I don't know, within my adult years, for sure, I thought there was some magic like place when I'm like, well, most of the peanut butter's gone. Like, I can't get in there. I can't get that off. And there is no like big hose. They're not doing that to every peanut butter jar. And furthermore, I just realized that I hadn't thought about this, but another reason to make sure that you're cleaning that stuff out is for wildlife. I had spoken with Toronto Wildlife Center a few weeks ago, and that is one of the big kind of common causes that they have to do rescues, is like raccoons with their heads stuck inside of a jar because it's not fully cleaned, like any kind of food jar. Definitely peanut butter, because I don't blame them. Peanut butter is awesome. But yeah, so that's another reason. If you need another reason to really clean it, that's one of them. But maybe Emily can kind of expand on that, or if anyone else has any questions about that.
I can say I agree. It feels like it's a big pain to clean out recyclables, and it feels like a big hassle, but it's true. If there's just a little bit of food and grease on some things and that spills onto paper, that paper becomes less recyclable. If you got a lot of food in there and it gets cooked in with all the plastics during the plastic recycling, it's going to lower the quality of plastic that can be turned into new products. So it's really not good to have things in there. And the way like the recycling facility works, I didn't have any photos of this. I've seen some cool videos of I visited the city's recycling facility and I've seen some videos of it. It's pretty cool. But like, wait, Erika, you have too? Yeah.
I have visited. I am a
It's
trier
so
ambassador. Yes.
Nice. So it's what happens is like all of these mixed recyclables get dumped onto like conveyor belts, and those go up, and you have people at the top like sorting and taking the really big contaminants like clothing off, and then like plastic bags off, and then they have these series of conveyor belts with like puffs of air to blow the paper up so it gets sorted off this way, and then like optical sorters that look at the shape of bottles, because remember, recycling is all about packaging, so they know the shapes of typical packages. And so they'll say, oh, it's like this shape, that's like a Tide laundry bottle or something. And they'll send it off this way because they know what kind of plastic it is. And so they're using all these complex sorters and robots and stuff to sort our garbage, which just kind of says something interesting about us, that we put so much technology into sorting our garbage because we don't want to do it. But that's another thing. But we have all this, again, I don't want to make people feel guilty about it, but it is just interesting that we've designed this whole system to sort waste rather than finding other, and then saying that reusables are too complicated or something. So all of this stuff is happening. And what I've noticed is that there's no real way to pick off really contaminated things unless there's a human there who can see the contamination and pick it out. But also those recycling bins they can't really handle small things. So think about like bottle caps and pens, and even like I feed my cat food. Things like, oh yeah, cutlery and straws. Those things are so small, they just roll off the conveyor belts. They're too small to actually be sensed. So a lot of small things won't get recycled. And I was disappointed when I heard that. Like I have cat food, and it's like those kind of peel off lids. And so what you should do is rinse the lid and stick it in the can and kind of pinch it closed so that it gets recycled. Otherwise, it's so thin that it gets kind of caught up with the paper and it doesn't necessarily get recycled. So like try to keep, little things aren't really going to get recycled that well. Sometimes if I have small bits of paper as well, or like construction paper, I put them in the organics rather than recycling, because that's not going to, it's not really going to recycle very well anyway. Construction paper from craft time.
Which is also brings it back to like why EPR is the extended producer responsibility is so important, because make them deal with it. Like we shouldn't have to be overwhelmed with packaging that we had no control over, no choice. Like we just wanted the thing inside of the packaging. We didn't want, even if you don't
We are
care
not buying the packaging.
Yeah, even if you don't care about or not don't care, but like even if like waste isn't, on your radar, like it's still annoying to have your recycle bin fill up in a matter of a couple of days. Nobody enjoys that, having to take it out unnecessarily. Okay, so
that also reminds me, actually, something that they've been I think it's going to be part of like the EU recycling regulations for their ban on single-use plastics. And I know it's also being talked about in California. I can't remember if it's definitely happening in California or not. Sorry about that. But the idea of tethering bottle caps to bottles, because bottle caps is something that you find a lot in beach litter because they're small and they're lightweight. And you take the lid off and you drink the water. And like sometimes, on water bottles are really, really tiny little thin lids. And the fact is that those can't really be recycled. They're a big they're kind of like a prevalent type of pollution or litter. So, you know, when you get like a sports drink bottle and you take the lid off and the bottle lid is tethered to the bottle, it's like, oh, that's so easy. We could do that for disposable bottles as well. So they're just passing a law saying you got to do it, and the companies will have to do it. And that means it's their extra expense to add that little tether. And then we don't have to worry about bottle caps and telling people whether to leave them on or off when they recycle them.
That's a really good thing for, again, like with wildlife as well, right? Because so many birds and different marine life will ingest those and potentially die.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the top 10 things that we always find during our beach cleanups, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Let me see if I can share the.
I just want to go one step behind, and I think it's about also companies. When you're designing a product, you have to think about everything, not only the profit, not only the market. But I think when we have the right regulations, making sure that the companies take care of important factors, it's when companies start doing better choices. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For some reason, I don't know, it's not letting me access the poll. But anyway, we'll just move on. So the next one was, do you know why? Oh, no, sorry. Do you live in a multi-residence complex? What's that number? I do. I'm in a townhouse, a condo townhouse. So I don't have Toronto city pickup. Is that, what's the case? Sorry, half of you are?
We live, yeah, there's a few residents, but we do have city, we have municipal pickup.
That's good. Anyway.
Yeah, we have municipal pickup too, so there's only a few of us.
Yeah, that's good. And how about you, Erika? Do you have municipal pickup?
Municipal, yeah.
Oh, wait, so Lynn, Adriana, and Erika, you all live in multi-res buildings?
Yes.
Ours it's not a building. We have three different tenants. So
okay.
Yeah.
So it's like a house with apartments.
It is, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Split level.
That's my situation too. Well, it's cute. Like, so the way you asked this, Sophie, it's like it fits because the fact is that, as I mentioned before, cities and municipalities are responsible for picking up from residential buildings, but under Ontario law, multi-res buildings are sort of classified as commercial buildings. They're not treated the same as residential. So that's why you could be in a condo tower or an apartment tower or co-op that doesn't have city service. So if you're in a single family home, you have to have city waste collection. And a single family home, or like a house that is like a single family home but has less than 8 units, still counts as non-multi-res. But once you're over 8 units, you count as a multi-res building, and then you can decide to go with GFL or Waste Management or Miller Waste Company instead of going with the City of Toronto collection, which is just weird because that means some residents in Toronto may not have green bin pickup and they don't get the same recycling pickup, even though they're still residents. And it's just because of some quirk of provincial regulation that multi-res buildings are treated like commercial. And it's partly because in really big towers, maybe, I'm guessing, they have those big bins. So certain waste companies have the ability to pick up those big bins. So in some smaller cities, the municipality won't even offer collection to multi-res buildings because they just don't want to do that. Where Toronto, we're really lucky because the City of Toronto offers that waste collection to multi-res buildings, which is why multi-res buildings have the opportunity to do so much waste diversion.
So,
I'm like, oh, sorry. I just have a quick question. Do you, or maybe you can give us some insight into maybe why a building would choose to go with a private company versus, is that what you were going to ask, Sophie? Sorry.
So from what I've heard, so generally what will happen is if you go with city waste collection, the city's policy is to slowly increase waste fees over time. So for anyone who doesn't know, the city charges for garbage collection, but recycling and organics are free. And that's the same for all waste customers. So in our house, for example, like houses will pay based on the size of the garbage bin. So you have like a small, medium, large, or extra large garbage bin. I think they phased out the extra large. And it's a few $100s a year. but you can have as many recycling and organics bins as you want. And yard waste collection is free, and e-waste collection is free, and special waste collection is free. So the city's whole waste structure, like the billing structure, was set up to encourage waste diversion and to encourage people to make less waste. So that same billing structure applies for high-rise buildings. So they'll say, okay, the garbage collection, we're going to start charging more and more for garbage because recycling and organics is free. So buildings that are able to offer good recycling and organics collections save so much money, right? They can cut their bills down to like $5,000 a year, which is really small. They can take advantage of all the free recycling, organics, and special waste collection programs. But on the face of it, some buildings look at this and they say, well, these guys will charge me less for garbage. They're not going to tell me to pick up recycling. They're not going to force me to collect organics. They're not going to force me to do all this stuff. Whereas the city says, if you're with our program,
To sort
you
it
got to do all
out.
because, like, you know, that's the city's, you know, philosophy on the whole thing. You've got to use recycling. You've got to use organics. You can't just use the city's garbage and then not do the other things. So for some of them, they don't want the hassle. They see it as hassle. Some of them may sign an agreement with a waste company that says, we'll keep your prices low. We'll offer you the same recycling and organics, but we'll keep your prices lower. And I've heard from some buildings that it doesn't actually usually end up staying that low. It might increase over time, but it's different circumstances. And then there's a small portion of buildings in Toronto that the city can't currently serve. So they're just not eligible for city service because the driveway is too narrow for the city to get their trucks around, which I think that's kind of crappy. I think it would be great if the city just bought smaller trucks or found or contracted to a waste collector who could go into those areas, because then that would provide more equal service. So
what would you suggest to someone like me who I don't have access to a green bin? So I go to my neighbor who does. So he's been letting me do that for years now, which is yay. But I've been wanting to get my building on board with that. So like what kind of, what would be like a good carrot to dangle to be like, hey, wouldn't it be great if you like, I know it's not that easy, but like, I think I'm ready to challenge them again.
it's great. It's a good question. So there's two parts to it. So I'll start with one, which is just, again, kind of in the good news policy thing, if it happens soon, is that the city of Toronto actually has been planning for the last year and a half. They might slow things down because the pandemic has sort of changed a lot of timelines on things. They've been planning for the last few years to actually pass a bylaw that would require every multi-res building to have organics and recycling collection, even if they don't have city service. So to say, you know what, residents should be treated like residents. You should all get the same collection, you know, and it doesn't matter, you know, where you live and who's your waste service provider, you just have to have the same collection. So if the city passed that regulation, then that would kind of solve the problem. And that's something that we've been pushing for a while. They've been saying they're going to push, but it's stalled a little bit in terms of rolling it out, partly because the province is about to change their recycling rules. So everyone's like, oh, you know, all a lot of stuff happening.
Okay.
So that's one thing. But on the other side of it, it's really good to like try to push in our own homes and our own communities around these things. So my first tips would be like, don't try to do it alone because you might just burn out. That's always like my just personal tip, right? If we try to do all this stuff, to be like superheroes and solve all the problems on our own, we're going to hit some resistance and we're going to just feel so deflated and disappointed. So I'd say if there's a board meeting, like if you're in a condo building and there's a board or there's a member or like an owner's meeting, or if there's other residents in your building, you can maybe start a green team. Just put up a note and say, hey, anyone else interested in talking about environmental services in our unit? Did you know we could be saving a lot of money if we reduced our garbage and increased our recycling? Let's have a talk. And so, you know, maybe organize a meeting and talk to them. Okay. And then the amazing thing I can do next is sort of plug a project that T has right now. We have a project, we've been working with high-rise buildings for the last few years. And one of the things we've been doing is saying like, here's this amazing building in Scarborough, here's this amazing building in Etobicoke, here's an amazing building in Northwark. We're finding these like superhero buildings that have shown how they can save so much money and have like really positive community feel and really clean buildings and all these great results by using city service and having a green team and creating this really positive zero waste attitude in their buildings. So we've been highlighting these success stories, and now we're creating a set of online tools so people can sort of walk through and like use those tools in their own building. And some of the tools, like one of the first steps is to form a bit of a team and find some other people to help work with. But if you don't have a team, there'll still be some resources that you can take a look at. So we're going to be putting out some applications. We'll be inviting people to join us for that. We'll be having some online learning events and some resources that you can share. And one way to sort of get people excited about that is we'll have some more success stories. So you may have heard of the great building in Northern Scarborough called Mayfair on the Green, where they've reduced their garbage they have a building of 282 units, and they put out 1 bin of garbage every 6 weeks for the whole building. And they are just like superstars, right? Like there's mind blowing. And so that's a success story that you tell people, and people are like, whoa, that's amazing. How'd they do it? It's like, cool, come on in and let's have it.
We'll put that in the
Yeah. So
description.
I am
There's a really
I am
sorry.
a 3R ambassador, and it's what the city of Toronto does actually. They whoever is interested in waste reduction, and you volunteer your time and they give you a training. That's the way I went to visit the recycling facility. But it's very interesting how the management of I was able to see a lot of stories, success stories of other people that were like in buildings that they were not even sorting out the garbage, or they didn't have like we think about waste only as recycling and green, blue, and black bin, but they were even doing like share books shelves, or they were creating a mini tool library inside the building. So people didn't need to throw away their stuffs, exchange items, activities. So I think there are a lot of green minds in your building. So I think it will be very cool to start uniting those green minds. And the management will follow, because first there is social pressure, and second there is a lot of money to save. So
Quick question, Emily. Is that program with resources already launched, or is it something like, is there already a link where people can find resources, or is it something that's coming out?
I can give you a link to sign up for our email, so that as soon as we've got things ready to launch, you can sign up and get it. We've got a lot of things like in test. We were going to launch it early in March, right before the pandemic hit. So now we're kind of reworking things to work remotely. Because, for the project, we did like some things where we went into buildings and we dug through their garbage and actually did a waste audit and analysis for each building. And now we're like, all right, we cannot do that right now. So let's find a way to like looking at the opportunity, we're now going to be able to reach more buildings and help more people use these resources. So I think it's going to be pretty fun. But, Erika, you're right. Like the city has a 3Rs ambassador program, which is like provides training if you're in a building that gets city service. So unfortunately, it wouldn't work for you, Sophie. You can apply and you can take this training program, and then they kind of give you some tips on how recycling works and then give you some support. And so our project, we're like, yeah, take all those free city resources and then here's some other ideas about what we've seen is successful. So
I have one more quick question just about the waste removal. So why does the City of Toronto allow privatized waste removal? Is it because we don't have the capacity to actually process it all? Like why doesn't the municipality just take that on all on our own, and then that way we can ensure that these buildings have access to recycling and green bin programs because it's all municipal?
Do you mean for the multi-res buildings that don't currently have waste service?
Yeah, like they have an option, but why do they even have that option? Like, why does the city allow private companies to come in and do something that they can do, or can they not do it?
As far as I understand, the default under like Ontario regulations is that as considered sort of a commercial building, multi-res buildings they have the option of choosing waste service from whoever they want. So for a municipality to pass a regulation that would say you must use us, there might be some challenges around competition. I don't quite know. So I know that the city can pass a bylaw saying you must provide this equal level of service, but I don't know if they could force people to choose them as a service provider. But I'm not an expert on that, but I think that might have been what was said in a previous staff report when this was discussed.
Okay.
So the city can require equal service, but I don't.
Okay.
That's how I understand it. And that's kind of what we want, right? We would like whoever's providing the waste collection. I think, you know, the city and publicly accountable waste collection is a really good way that we've seen that there's good transparency and good accountability that's easy to track, and there's like a method for sort of making sure that that's verified when we have it run by a government. But I think just having a regulation that would say everyone needs to provide the same level of service, whether you're a residential building or whether you're an office. Like, why are offices and grocery stores allowed to throw away food and not have to compost it? Like, those things are so obscene, and
that's frustrating.
Okay, the next one is, do you know why aluminum foil is not accepted in Toronto Blue Bin or Blue Box, but aluminum pans are?
Does anyone know and want to guess, and then I can answer?
Is it because of the thickness of the aluminum itself? It's too thin when it's just a piece of foil?
Yes, I think that's my understanding. So I'm not going to be like, I'll be totally honest. I don't 100% know. So maybe the 3 Hours Ambassador trained person knows that more than me. It's because of the thinness. Flattened aluminum foil is more likely to have food in it, right? Like, people fold it up afterwards, it's got food. It's hard to wash and rinse it out because it gets all crinkly. And it's so thin and lightweight that it probably just gets mixed in with paper. So it's just like some things, it's not that they're not technically recyclable. It's just like practically the way they float out of the bin or the way they fall off the conveyor belt, or, you know, that's why they're not recyclable.
I would say that it is true. That's true. I just remember that in the training they told us, because as I am very interested in takeout, I was very persistent asking about the takeout containers of aluminum materials, and they were always saying that it was fine to, even when it had leftovers inside the container. But I didn't understand actually, like, why some of them are fine and some of them are not fine, and I couldn't get a properly right answer. But I actually think it's because of the optical robots, that in the end, I mean, it's just about weight. You wouldn't really, it's not so advanced, the technology, to really sort out every kind of aluminum, every material. So that's a very good point.
And it can be a combination of things, right? It can be that it's dirty, it's lightweight, and it's hard to see. I know that some forms of lightweight plastic get mixed in with paper as well. So.
Okay, so the next one is, do we have to remove the paper label from cans before placing it in the blue box? I hope not.
I hope not too.
I was like, am I just gonna admit it? Because I think I am.
Yeah, never really thought about that.
I feel really bad that I don't know the full answer.
I
would say you should.
Yeah. Okay.
Wait, sorry, Sophie, you said you checked?
I think, hang on, let me go to my TO waste app.
I think you should. It is true, Emily, because I even remember for the envelopes, for the mail envelopes, you should take out the plastic part and put it. You can put it together on the blue bin, but needs to be separated. So I guess for the cans will work in the same way.
Yeah, I don't think I get many envelopes anymore. I think I stopped removing the plastic window. See?
Yeah, I thought I heard, see, it's very confusing. I thought I heard something, I used to remove the window, and then I heard that you don't bother removing the window. And I think I remember checking at the time, because I was like, well, if I don't have to remove it, Then
whoa.
You don't have, but you will help a lot.
okay.
I'm feeling pretty terrible that I'm supposed to be answering these questions for you, and I don't.
That's okay.
No,
But
Emily, that's okay.
that just
It
shows
shows how complicated it is.
Exactly. That just shows exactly what you talked about in the beginning about individual action, like that we shouldn't feel so bad. And that's why it's all so important for producers to be responsible for the stuff they're making.
I think it makes sense though that we should remove, like if we're thinking about it, we should probably remove it just to make the process easier. Because even if like an envelope could still technically be recycled with the plastic bit, like any contaminants are just lowering the quality of the recycled material that ends up getting produced, which then like decreases the market for that material. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, but I have a question. But it's so little, that little piece of plastic, that would that even get recycled, or would that be one of those little bits that just is too light to even be noticed, and it just ends up somewhere else
tip
anyway?
for that, the person that gave me the training gave me. It's an amazing tip. So you take a big envelope or big bag of paper, and you put all the paper inside, and then you fold it, and you just put paper on the paper on the bag. And so the people that is sorting out, because in the end, just you have like electronic sorting, but you have also a lot of people working there sorting out things with their hands. They will see that it's a big bag of paper, and it will be much more easier for them. And in the end, you will increase the chances for the paper to get recycled.
Great tip.
I definitely do that with small things like receipts and small bits of paper, right? Like I put them all into an envelope, and I'm like, okay, all the paper's in one spot. Just like when you have clear, like flexible, stretchy bags, you put them all into another bag so that then that's easier to recycle it rather than if it's like little individual ones.
Yeah, it's not clear on the TO Waste app. However, when they show the picture of all different types of cans, the label is not on them. So, I guess taking off the paper is a good idea.
And it probably depends on like the actual material, because even receipts, like receipts that are matte are recyclable, but then receipt paper that is shiny goes straight to the garbage.
Yeah.
So even just in like one category, as in receipt paper, there's two different types, and you have to, distinguish between the two, and it's so tricky.
It is.
Oh yeah, so the pizza box, yes, Jen just said that, but the pizza boxes, yeah, I learned that a couple years ago. The part that's not greasy is recyclable, but the part that's greasy is compostable.
Yeah.
So I often just rub some grease on both parts and put it in compost.
I love that you rub grease on both parts. I just like fold it all up and it all goes in. I love that you take the time to do that though. That is
well, I mean,
if anyone checks, they were both greasy.
Like you can't get me. Compost feels like it's better. It's less of a process, right? Like it's less harmful.
It will go to one place. Yes.
Yeah, and like
no one else will sort it out.
The whole, yeah. Anyway, thanks for mentioning that, Janiki. Okay. Last one is, why is stretchy plastic accepted in our recycling and non-stretchy plastic / the rigid? So like a grocery bag, like, so when you say stretchy, is like you can actually like poke through. I think Lynn might have been the one that mentioned this in one of, I don't remember, in our relationship. At some point you mentioned it. But then like the freezer, your frozen foods, like your stand-up pouches, like that's plastic, but it's not recyclable because it's not that stretchy. Do you know the answer to that, Emily, or have an idea?
You're like, you might not actually know the answer, Emily. So let me just ask. No, I know the answer to that one. Stand-up pouches, yes. Thank you. It's an easy one. The stand-up pouches, it's because it's usually multi-layers of plastic. And then I think also like the zipping part is a different type of plastic. So one of the complicating things about plastics is that like you know, with new packaging, like there's always new different types of packaging and like new types of plastics and combinations of different layers of plastics. Like you think about foil pouches for kids' drinks or something, where it's like foil on one side and then some plastic and then some outer layer with a label on it, and then a straw and then a zip and all these things. So all of those different layers together make it very hard to recycle. So this is why a producer responsibility regulation says, cool, you want to use this stuff, you better make sure it gets recycled, and it's not, then you can make it as complicated as you want, as long as it's not toxic and as long as it's getting recycled, and we're cool. Rather than every municipality in Canada having to reinvent their recycling facilities every year, someone comes up with a new package. So, yep, so stand-up pouches will be considered something that needs to be recycled under the new producer responsibility regulations. So that will be good, because it's just anything that's packaging will be included.
Yeah, that's great. It wasn't that long ago too that stretchy plastic in Toronto, or like grocery bags, started to get accepted, right? Because they weren't accepted for a long time.
No.
Yeah.
It's just a few years now. Yeah. There's a lot of plastics recyclers in Ontario, actually. So there's some recyclers like west of Toronto. Sorry.
That was a cat, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a cat. Cat or partner, one of those.
Yeah.
Partner.
What was I saying? Oh, they're good. They're actually like recyclers in Ontario that recycle stretchy plastic and recycle different things. So, you know, when we think about having producer responsibility and like companies having to really prove that what they created gets recycled, that helps us create a circular economy. Because now, instead of shipping overseas to someone who has to send a certificate back or prove that it got recycled, if you just send it locally and you've got local manufacturers, then it helps support green jobs here.
Nice.
Man, there's all these reasons. I could talk about waste all day.
I know, same.
Quick note from the YouTuber audience. Kate has weighed in on our discussion about contaminants in recycling. And she thinks that the plastic window is likely considered an acceptable contaminant. And it's the same for places that recycle coffee cups. They shred them and the plastic lining is just a tolerated contaminant. And then with aluminum foil, it's a lesser quality than aluminum pans, so it dilutes the quality of the aluminum. This all makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kate, for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks. Great answers.
And then there's like, I forgot to tell you, Emily, do you mind if we do like a little lightning round of, hey, Tony.
Hi, Tony.
A little lightning round of, what?
Before we do the lightning round, can I ask one more question?
Yes.
What should we, since we are individuals, but you know, we shouldn't feel individually guilty and individually like we can't save the world. How can we best focus our energy in terms of like, I don't know, lobbying the government to stop plastics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Or what can we really do? Like, what's the best avenue for action, I guess? For all of us to take action together.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think let me think of there's a few different things it can do. Here's how I'll frame it. So one is joining environmental groups that are helping, that can help you identify these policy opportunities. So like the federal government's talking about things, environmental groups, environmental lawyers, and people that we're working with and coalitions that we're part of are like, hey guys, now's the time to like hit them with a petition because that's going to really have an impact. Or now's the time that they're asking for public comment, call your MPP or your MP or your councillor. So joining groups like T and other groups that are working on these kinds of issues, and just trust that there are a lot of people who care about this and they're like, we need people to help us get that word out. So joining groups like that and taking the action that they recommend. Educating yourself. So, learning more about these things, and then maybe helping do some of the myth busting. So when you're talking to other people, I think some of the big myths that I always like to bust is that it is a consumer choice and that we can change the situation by feeling guilty and making individual choices. I think it's really, we can do things like that to make ourselves feel consistent and have integrity with our own values, but it's not the end of our activism. So, when we when we talk with other people, we're like, hey, that's great that we're making these choices, but have you ever thought about why that company is allowed to make that? So, you know, you can become a bit of an ambassador for some of these values and helping people understand the concept of producer responsibility. I also like myth busting that, you know, like I mentioned before, the idea that somehow burning garbage or burning plastics or creating energy from waste is somehow a form of recycling, when really that's just destroying a resource and wasting it. So, but people get really excited by those ideas. They're like, oh, we can make energy from our garbage. So we're getting rid of garbage and we're making energy, but it's actually a terrible solution. So I think sort of educating people around us and then joining with campaigns, and then, you know, when we're ready and there's moments to mobilize people, do that. Like, I think you guys are all also doing amazing things here, right? Like just talking about it and keeping the conversation alive and showing examples of how to live a reusable life, or starting a business to teach people about reusable lifestyle. So I think these are all really cool examples.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Lynn. And also before we got on, and we all do this in our own homes too, is like and this is not to feel like you have to do this with every piece of garbage or recycling or whatever, but there are lots of fun things that you can do with some of the stuff that is recyclable, like using an old tin and making, like, you know, stuff like that, put holes in the bottom, that kind of thing, using lids as a saucer for your plants, making old t-shirts into macrame. We have a WE-Solation episode a few weeks back, and I still have to do it. I messed it up all the time.
So fun. It's so rewarding.
I know. I've literally been thinking about it like every day. Maybe today's the day. But yeah, just like fun. This one was really cool. I think a lot of people have seen this one, like using like a lid. So cool. You like broken jars, and then you have a lid, and you're like, what am I supposed to do with it? And you can put like elastics on it for your soap, you know, just little fun things to kind of like rethink like waste or recycling or whatever.
And I will add something else, Sophie. And I think if we start thinking more when we buy something, and then everything will change, because then we will support businesses that are thinking about their and being like more responsible for their products, but also us taking accountability of what are we buying. Like, do we really need those ones? I remember Lynn giving this very good tip in the Zero Waste Cafe about thinking and asking yourself, really, I really, really, really need to buy this, or can I live without it? Like, we don't need a lot of things to live and to survive. So I would say that that's the first step, because if you don't buy it, then you don't need to think or feel guilty about the recycling or where is it going to go. So I get very passionate about this.
But it's fun to think about all the things we can do. One of the things we started doing recently is we have some leftover lids. Don't ask me where the jars went. I don't know, but we have leftover lids, and we've been using them even for dinner. Like if we have a little bit of barbecue sauce, we'll put it like in that little lid instead of like just like smearing it on the plate, or like some olives to separate things when we have people over, for example. Instead of like going out and buying one of those plates that has dividers, just like throw on a couple of lids on the plate and then fill those up with things so that you can separate stuff. So it's fun to kind of get creative and think of ideas of how to use those things that are left over.
It is fun.
Yeah.
It is fun for sure. All right, so I'm going to do the lightning round questions, Emily.
Woo! My favorite part. No, I'm just joking.
Backstreet Boys or NSYNC?
Don't know.
Neither is okay.
Neither.
Or your favorite group? Not neither. Your favorite group when you were a teenager.
Oh, there you go.
Well, I think it was Backstreet Boys. I just know that I sing some of the songs at karaoke, but I honestly can't remember which one wrote the song. I think it's Backstreet Boys is the one I always sing at karaoke. Sorry.
If anyone has any, just feel free to jump in. Oh,
Beach
I like
or mountains?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry?
Beach or mountains?
Oh, beach. I love swimming.
Nice. if you had a superpower, what would it be?
Oh my God.
I always think about yours, Adriana.
What's Adriana's?
Recycling everything.
It's definitely flying, but when I think about flying, it's kind of like, it looks like I'm like swimming through the air, right? You're not like actually like, flying, flapping your pretend wings around. You're kind of swimming.
Swim flying.
Swim flying.
I ever heard anyone
Peter
say that.
Pan.
I do that in my dreams, totally.
I kind of like the flying one because I like swimming a lot. So I feel like I could be like swimming in the air. Because right now I'm really missing swimming pools. So I'm like, oh man, I wish I could. Yeah, sure, flying. Let's do it.
Let's do
I was
it.
thinking of something more like the power to like ease the world's pain and suffering. But I thought that's kind of a weird superpower. But of course, wouldn't you want that?
That sounds
Right?
lovely.
Absolutely.
Right? I'm just
Like
like,
an Tylenol for the world or something. Here.
bring world peace. Like that would be a cool
Everybody
one.
has that superpower. It's called smile.
Oh, that's super cute.
With a smile like that, Lynn.
Yes.
Tony, that was the best look. Does anyone have any other
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
Cake or pie?
Pie.
Would you
Wow,
put your,
very-
ooh, me too. I'm such a pie person. Do you put your glasses right side up or upside down on the shelf?
I don't wear glasses. Oh, you mean cups? I put them right side up.
Same.
Yes.
Lynn, I know you love the lightning round. Do you have
I'm actually like blanking on questions for this one. I only have like deep questions right now. Like if you could redesign the entire city of Toronto from the ground up and just like start over, what are the 3 things that you would make sure to have in the city?
Wow.
Oh, green spaces everywhere. See, I love these kinds of questions. I studied urban planning. I totally think about it. Green spaces everywhere. No cars. No buildings higher than probably 8 to 12 stories maximum.
Yeah,
Right?
agreed.
Openable windows, stuff like that. Oh wait, is that already 3?
Keep going.
Go ahead, go ahead.
That's a good question for her.
Beautiful public space everywhere. Like I just think we need to have, our cities need to be more like a forest with people living in it, right? Like just like this beautiful.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
But buildings that aren't too tall, so like there's still this connection. Like you can still see people when they're like 8 stories up and they're standing on their balcony. You can still wave to them. But once they're 20 stories and you can't open a window, there's this sort of like disconnection between people. And cities can be so alienating because they're so big. So like, I'd love to make it small and yeah.
Sounds amazing. Well, if you ever build that city, I'm coming.
Yes.
Oh,
invite us.
Send us the
Fly
notice.
there, solve all the recycling problems. It'll be amazing.
Brilliant.
Well, this has been super fun. I feel like I learned a ton of stuff. I'm definitely going to go back. And I wanted to, in case I didn't already say it, but I want to make sure that that we put in the description that amazing video of Mayfair on the Green. I think it's so inspirational, and I'm just reminded of it as we were talking. I'm going to include that in my kind of pitch to the condo board when I get my green team together. Because rather than making it like you guys should do this, it's like, look at this. Isn't this amazing? Should it like, wow. Right? So yeah, we'll put that in the description because it's such a good video.
I can put it in here right now.
Oh yeah, please. Yeah,
so,
I forgot.
Let me just do it. So I'll put it here and then I guess you can share that on the YouTube thing. But I also shared the link if you want to sign up, if you want to just follow T on social media. I don't do any of that stuff, so I'm not very good at it. I don't know how to call it, but it's TO and Biro is always our handle on different things. And then you can sign up specifically for emails about the High Rise project and what's happening over the next few weeks at this page here.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, we totally kept you like way longer than we expected, which is kind of, I anticipated it.
Right? Yeah.
We almost always do that. Every time I see you, it stretches way beyond our meeting time.
Yeah, so I know you have to go. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for tuning in. And please feel free to share anything you learned today so that everyone can learn more about what's going on in Toronto. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. This was really fun.
Thanks so much,
Yeah.
Emily.
Thanks,
We'll
guys.
see you
Good day,
soon.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Bye.
Emily.
Bye.